En Passant by Olivia Giacobetti for Frederic Malle is one of those fragrances that has a real grip on my psyche. Part of it is personal. I have a very specific fragrance memory with this, and part of it is just the idea and the concept of the fragrance. On one hand, it's a fairly simple and straightforward lilac soliflor, yet the name, combined with the smell, the muted tones of the smell, the naturalness of the smell, it always evokes a sort of melancholy and also contemplation. I find that it causes me to think about a lot of different things. Of course, the name En Passant means in passing, which if you Google it is also apparently a chess move, but I think it also references passing by lilacs, the smell of lilac in the air. What the Frederic Malle website says about it is interesting. It says lilac, but idealized, reworked, cleansed of its dusty, slightly honeyed notes, a purified, aerated lilac, as if it had transcended itself, evocative of spring, the fleeting moments of childhood, youth, and innocence. The lilac of En Passant naturally leads us into the green gardens of the Ile-de-France region, and I think therein lies its melancholy, if it reminds you of more innocent times, of spring, of things that have passed. And on that note, I think it's also a good jumping off point to mention that Frederic Malle is leaving his own brand. I don't have a lot to say about that because anything would be conjecture. I tend to be a fairly optimistic person. I don't see why Estee Lauder would want to completely ruin the brand after he leaves. I think they'll do their best to continue in his stead, but whether that's possible or not remains to be seen. I think for sure future releases will have a different feel under different curation and a different eye, but it could also be an exciting churn of events if they find a worthy replacement. I do hope they don't discontinue any or many of the low sellers. I do have a feeling Frederic Malle, having such a strong perspective and strong personality, was sort of a dam against the corporate interests, money-making interests, and they've done an amazing job of keeping really everything in the line in production. So fingers crossed. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I was surprised to find he's only in his 60s, so hopefully after a bit of retirement, he will be on to some new projects. Selfishly, we all hope for that. But it's also been 25 years. The man deserves a break. I think being a creative myself, I really understand more why people want to move on from things they've created. I often think about this in regards to Francis Kirkjohn discontinuing many of his beloved old fragrances like Absolute Pour le Soir. While I do find that a much more interesting fragrance than his current work, it's so completely different than his current work. I wonder if beyond what he says about low sales, if he just doesn't feel like that represents him anymore and he doesn't want it out there. Pure speculation, but I understand this kind of thinking. So looking forward to what comes next and hoping for the best in the further evolution. I think as a brand concept of something curated by something, it could certainly live beyond Frederic Malle for a long time, and that may have been part of why he wanted to sell it, so that it could outlive him. Partly my perspective is maybe colored by the fact that I've been into fashion for longer than I've been into fragrance, and the kind of designer merry-go-round there is so common. People sell their name, they leave their own house, new designers get installed. It's sometimes bad if you really love what a designer did, but as En Passant teaches us, the only constant in life is change, and there's no real use in whining about change like a small child. That's one of the things that maturity brings you, is kind of the larger perspective on life and that the changes take place, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Anyway, on to En Passant. My fragrant memory of this is really interesting. I owned a 10 ml travel size of it first, which I brought with me on a trip to Iceland. And this trip, while the landscape was really beautiful, for various reasons was full of sort of emotionally conflicted events. But it also reminds me of, there were some beautiful, they weren't lilacs, but like purple fields of flowers. I went in summer, and just that connection to nature, there couldn't be a more perfect fragrance for that. So it brings up this very strange little trip I had to Iceland, the mixed feelings and emotions I had during that trip. so vividly. Since then, I've bought this bottle. You can see I've used a decent amount, and I'll spray it now. Again, I like what the Malle website says about it, that they've stripped the lilac of some of those sweeter honeyed accords. And one of my favorite things about this is the wheat accord. You get a real sense of wheatiness, which adds to that sense of really natural outdoorsiness. Again, it's straightforward lilac. I think it's the best lilac there is. Again, depends on what you want out of your lilac. It's so simple, but it's so perfect and it's so evocative. I feel like even without having a personal fragrance memory connection, it still brings out a lot of emotion in people. And then the name is really the coup d'etat, the thing, the icing on the cake, en passant. Contemplating that name with the fragrance at the same time is just such a beautiful experience. So the weedy, the cucumberness, it gives it this like of the earth rural quality that keeps it from being merely just a pretty floral. It's light, but I find that the musks, the cedar, it says there's like a little bit of a woody background. They last all day, but it stays light. If you're looking for something big and projecting, then you've clicked on the wrong video. But if you're looking for really beautiful art in a bottle, then you need to give En Passant a try. I like this perfume so much that I often, when I think of my favorite perfumers, Olivia Giacobetti is right up there on the short list. Yet I realize I own one and only fragrance by Olivia Giacobetti, which is this. So I consider her my favorite perfumer, among my favorite perfumers, based on this one perfume. Now, really unfortunately, I had tried her own brand, Iunx, I believe it's pronounced I-U-N-X, which I found on Nose, where I had ordered quite a few Frederic Malle bottles. And I loaded up on samples so that I could try the whole line. And I didn't know anything about this brand, and I fully planned on buying a few. I really like Talc, which is kind of her irisy, powdery fragrance, and another one called Ether, which was like a resinous fragrance. And then one day, the brand shuttered and all the bottles disappeared off Nose, and I couldn't find one anywhere. So I still have little tiny samples of her line, but that's a real loss. It was a really beautiful line. I know Olivia has done more work for Artisan, but I have to be honest, I haven't really revisited Artisan since their big sort of bottle shift over, which that was already years and years ago. Along those lines with Frederic Malle, 25 years in business, and I'm really overwhelmed by the beauty of the back catalog and even the beauty of fairly recent releases. And I think there's been a real continuity from the beginning, even right up until now in the brand. Even if we don't love every single new release, as recently as Heaven Can Wait, last year's release was back to something beautiful, something artful, something in the style of En Passant. So I still believe in the brand, and I think they've done great work in the past 25 years, really astonishingly good work in the past 25 years. A few other side notes. I have the shower gel, which smells just like the perfume. Now, I'm not sure this is really the ideal smell for the shower unless you want to feel sad and melancholy. It's not uplifting the way like maybe a citrus shower perfume is. But the effect that using the Frederic Malle shower gels has on me is I always want to wear the fragrance then that day. It doesn't leave enough fragrance on your skin to make that the scent of the day, which I enjoy. I don't want my shower gel to fragrance my skin, but the smell just reminds me how beautiful it is and then makes me want to follow it up by wearing it the rest of the day. I love the kind of character. I think I've said this in other videos. If I really, really had to pick only one fragrance, I think this would be such an interesting signature scent. I imagine the kind of person to smell like this would be a bookish type, spending their time in libraries, contemplative and soft-spoken, but very smart and creative. And yeah, it's such kind of a left of field choice. I think it would just be extremely interesting and intoxicating if this was your scent, your go-to scent. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful dry down. It doesn't, I think removing the sweetness was really key, because if you do smell a lilac, they do have a fairly sweet honeyed feel, and this replaces it with like a cooling, it mentions cucumber, and there's definitely that cooling sense of wateriness that you get from a cucumber mixed with that beautiful wheat, and everything just blends together so nicely into a single accord. I feel like you can smell the elements, but you can't really parse separate notes. They're really all together as one. Now, a special little treat, I thought I would leave a link here to some of my own work, which I've never talked about before. I created a funny little side project to write songs because I'm not really a songwriter. I tend to compose instrumental music, but the music video content was taken in Iceland. And whenever I smell this, I remember that time. It's another faceless video, but if you're interested, it was a secret side project, so secret nobody ever discovered it before, so I think it has maybe 100 views, but I'll link that in the description below. That's my sort of musical invocation of Passant. One of the most beautiful, evocative, thoughtful perfumes I know, and like I said before, there's certain perfumes, maybe you don't wear them every day, but you still think about them, if not every day, frequently. And Passant is one of those fragrances. Last night, as I lay in bed, for whatever reason, it came into my mind. I was just thinking about how much it means to me, the memories it evokes, the contemplation on life and on passing and on things being impermanent, and how at my age, I've really, really embraced letting go and, not feeling sad about those things that have passed, but leaving them in the past. Here we go, our last bit of like philosophy. Another thing I've discovered as I've gotten older, I'm not super old, I'm about the same age as a lot of us YouTubers, is that no matter what happened in the past, it almost doesn't matter today. So the memories of this trip to Iceland, it almost feels like it could have been a movie I watched. So in terms of life happiness, I always think like you could have had the most amazing 60 years of life, and then at the end of your life, if it's awful, all that matters is that it's awful right then. You can't really, it's not a bank. You can't store these memories and cash them in later. So you might as well make the best of now, whether the past was good or bad. Now is all that really matters. And I think Passant teaches us that. And I think fragrance in general, if you learn kind of the healthy lessons from fragrance, you can learn things are always disappearing, things are always changing. If your ego kind of fights that, you can become a hoarder, a backup bottler, a reformulation paranoiac. So it's sort of the other side, sort of the psychologically unhealthy side of perfume is the same, flip side of the potential valuable lessons that it can teach us as well.